Here's my pal Matt Zappa. He is an amazing drummer in many disciplines. He's killer at metal, and you can see him in his band Protein Collective doing that. He does all kinds of artsy rock stuff, like in Walter Sickert's Army of Broken Toys. And he's just one of those people who, when you think about Boston and you think about why Boston's a good place to live or do music, Matt Zappa is one of the people that pops in your head.
That's so nice of you. Thanks, bud.
Hell yeah. And we went to Berkeley together, and we were recently playing some gigs together, and I heard, Matt, you've got an amazing thing you do. You do a drum clinic at MIT.
Yes, sir. It's Heavy Metal 101 that happens every second semester at MIT. It's been going on for over 10 years now. And I've been lucky enough for the last 3 years to be able to do some drum clinics for it and give the history of like heavy metal and the origins about how it came about. And basically half of it is also Q&A, like telling my story about how I became a metalhead and like questions about like I've been touring around since I was maybe 19, 20, so all the stories about all that, and some of them are not safe for work. I kept it pretty clean, though, so
yeah,
it was that type of thing.
Man, you've been touring since 1920.
1920?
That was a tough time.
I am 20,000 years old. I'm actually Goro from Mortal Kombat.
It's such an honor to meet someone so old.
Hey, thank you for saying that.
So, your origin story coming into music, and particularly how you were grabbed by metal, is I think one of the most beautiful stories I've heard about music. Would you mind sharing a bit about that, like how it got started for you?
Well, there was a few different origins. I gave you one of the main ones. I'll get to that. But the first time I ever heard a metal song, I was watching MTV back in the day when I was like a little kid, and I saw the video for "Until It Sleeps" by Metallica, and I was just struck by it. Like I'm a big horror movie fan. I grew up watching like Michael Myers, Halloween, like what was it, Friday the 13th, like Chucky, all that different stuff. And when I saw that, I'm just like, it's a horror movie, the band. I'm like, I'm with this. That was one of my first introductions to metal, and it took me a few years to come back to it. And in the culture that I was in, it was very much like, if I wasn't listening to hip-hop, or I wasn't listening to hip-hop, it was just like, what are you? Why are you being weird? Like I grew up in very separate cultures of like, a lot of my family was in Mattapan. Mattapan, for a lot of people don't know this, it's a very Caribbean part of Boston, and that's where all my family was from. And then I grew up in a town called Canton, which is very Irish Catholic, just like suburban part of Massachusetts. And like going back and forth for that, it was it was just like I go back to Mattapan and be like, hey, I just got this new Rage Against the Machine record, I got this new Metallica thing. What? And then I go to Canton just like, oh, I love the Boston Bruins, I love hockey, and just like, what are you? So I kind of grew up a kid like feeling in many ways like an alien. Like, okay. And that's also the reason why people, if you know me, I watch E.T. That's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, I felt like very much an alien growing up, and I kind of pushed out, isolated. And it kind of made me a little bit more angsty growing up. So I was always drawn to music that was a little bit more aggressive, and I was always into hip-hop that was a little bit more pushed. I remember my first week of high school, I met this one kid who ended up being in my first death metal band. He was just like, oh, you're into metal, and then burnt me a CD.
What?
Burnt me, yes. Like, I'm kind of dating myself with that one.
Like a quesadilla you put in the microwave and the music goes on it.
It's a coaster now. I'll never forget coming home from school that day and putting my headphones on in the basement and just putting that on. The first song was South of Heaven by Slayer, and it has this big, like, slow brooding, like, build up, and just like this guy, like, malignly talking to, like, your right ear as it, like, swells around, and it just has this, like, big rise up to a peak, and he just screams, "Before you see the light, you must die!" And I was just like, holy shit! What was that? And I was in, and I finally went to a show. I was 14, and I went down to Lupo's in Rhode Island, and one of my favorite bands, Fear Factor, was playing. Fear Factor with a bunch of different bands that were opening up for it. But I'll never forget the moment of seeing that band and just seeing what metal was experienced live. And just double bass that was just like basically tenderizing you if you're like near the speaker, and just like the wave of people. You know, at certain shows, like the mosh pit hasn't started yet, but you're just at the whole like vibe is just surging.
Everyone's
like,
pushing towards the front.
Yeah, and just like the intro track started like, oh, it's about to be some shit.
Yeah.
But that moment hit, and then the music started, and they were just going off, and their first song was Demanufacture, and it just has this crazy double bass intro, which was beautiful to me. And it just started to get to a point of like, the mosh pit was like, yay over here, and I'm like, you get the surge of getting pushed closer and closer and closer. I'm just getting terrified. Like, I've tried to avoid the pit all night, but I'm like, because I've never seen anything like that before. Like, I didn't have YouTube to be able to see what like bands were like live.
Yeah.
So like, it gets closer and closer, and I end up in the pit, and like, you just get thrown all over the place. And I'm like, I'm a big dude. I was a big dude at the time, but I'm still getting like ragdolled all over the place.
Can you experience?
Oh yeah. And I'll never forget being hit like in the chest over here and falling backwards, and just looking up to the ceiling and thinking like, well, this is it.
Oh no.
Well, this is how I die. At least there's good music around me.
Yeah.
But then there's one big dude who just comes up and like just one arms me and picks me up and just gives me a look of like, you okay? And I said this in my MIT talk, and I'm just like, I wish I said something cool, but I was probably like, I'm good. And he's like, checks me out, like looks me over, like makes sure I'm not bleeding, I'm all set, and then immediately threw me back into the pit. And
lesson learned.
It's like, welcome to the fire. But that was like revolutionary to me, man. Like, and that was the first time ever outside of like my family or like friends, like someone cared for me and someone asked me if I was all right. And it was, at the time, man, I was far from all right. I don't know if I could swear on this whole thing.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I was far from all right, man. I was dealing with all kinds of stuff with, like, family issues, some abuse issues, like me coming out. Well, not even close to coming out, but, like, realizing feelings to me, like, I'm a gay man, but I was very scared of it at the time. I came from a religious household as well. But, like, I had all this stuff going in my head, and, like, to have someone to have the kind of empathy to look after someone that they've never met before. And honestly, if I saw this guy probably on the street, I'd be like, whatever, just put my head down and like, I'm not dealing with this guy right now. I'm going to move away from him. And he just looked out for me, and I will never forget that, man. And I wish I told this, when I told the story at MIT, that was the moment at the MIT talk, it's half of it's metalheads from the scene, half of it's MIT students, and that was when I just looked up and just saw like tears, which I didn't prepare for at all. To like, when I was telling my stories, that people were gonna start crying during them, and because everyone in there had that moment of just like they found their people. And I will never forget that, man. I wish I could meet him today and to be like, dude, because of you, like, I started a band, I started playing all these different places. I've toured literally the world playing music, finding myself and finding something that was home to me because of you looking out for me like that. And those records that I grew up with, like Cynic's Focus, like Demanufactured by Fear Factory, Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation, like all these records were like teachers and friends to me that like after like crazy days at school that I would come back home and like blast these records and just I could take a breath and relax. It was the moment of, that was like my Ritalin.
Wow.
But I really, really hope that person's doing well, because they affected someone that personally, and they may have not even known. And in the metal scene, I try my best to give that. Because there's certain people, Brian Fair from Shadows Fall, he was always the dude at the back of the Palladium. You always see his massive dreadlocks from like a mile away. And he was a dude that talked to everyone and made sure everyone felt comfortable. He was like Mr. Rogers of metal. It's like, oh, how's it going, man? Like checking out, like making sure everyone's good type of thing. Yeah. It was like that guy from the first show, Brian Fair from Shadows Fall, just kind of molded me to try to be that kind of person for the music community. And not only just that, like the LGBT community. Recently I had a fan of Protein like reach out to me, and she was just like, I don't have too many role models in that are LGBT in metal, and I consider you like my metal dad. Holy shit, I couldn't stop crying anytime I saw that. I posted it to like a few like gay metal groups I'm a part of, and it was just like, yeah, man, I'm just doing my best to try to help out. I try to make music for that person I was when I was 16, when I really needed it.
Thank you for doing that, for being that person, because I think music's like a magic wand, it can be used for good, like the attention it brings and like the way that it affects people. You can also use it for bad, and I know there's corners of metal that kind of does that. It's like
which is a shame, which is very much shame.
But that's true, for any genre, and it's not like I don't think it's like a metal problem.
I think it hurts more for me personally that there's certain metalheads that people pigeonhole black metal as like extremely racist and homophobic and all this different stuff, and there's people in there, I'm just like, you're the outsiders of a lot of popular music, and why are you being that shitty to someone else, man? Like, you listen to this music because you needed it. You really, like, that hit you in a way that, like, you were scared, and it made you feel powerful. That's what metal did for me. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel powerful to the point I felt like I could be comfortable in myself.
Well, it seems like a lot of what drew you, first of all, to feel like an outsider was love. Like, you had love for the Bruins, and you had love for hip-hop, and you had love for all these things that seemed conflicting, and to be like cast aside because of what you love is such a like kind of a gorgeous way to become like determined to do something.
Oh, I was very much a chip on my shoulder when it came to like. I started music relatively late compared to like a lot of the musicians that I came up with. Like, everyone started when they were like 8 years old, or like 5 years old, 3 years old even. I started playing drums when I was like 15. And it was the moment of like, I had all these people saying like, oh, you can't do this, or like, get off the drum seat, or being like laughed off stage. I got laughed off stage at my first show I ever played.
By people you knew?
Yes.
You can always
count. To be fair, the video was really bad.
you can always count on people who've known you for a long time to try to decide what you are. Like, I felt that going to the same, like with the same classmates in middle school and high school. It's like I was always 6th grade Ben to people, even when I was like a senior. I was still that guy to them. They saw me like go through puberty and like do all this stupid shit.
But yeah, you'll always be that kid in lunch class that did that lunch line that did this or that. But you're always held to that certain point.
Totally. Yeah.
And yeah, that happens, and people get stuck in their ways, man.
But then you went to Berkeley.
Yes.
And so did I, and that was a chance to basically become a new person.
Oh my god, yo. I will say this, my first 10 minutes of Berkeley, like my parents leaving them in the dorms, were better than my whole 4 years of high school. If you're having trouble in high school right now, like you have a big reach with like a lot of younger kids, power through it. You can make it. It will be better. It will trust me, it gets better. You're gonna get to college or career afterwards, and you're gonna find your people. It's gonna take a while. I've had to say this to students of mine, like I say this directly personally to you. The kids that have been through some horror stories of bullying, like I've been through, that will make you cry, but you could find your space, you could find your people. Like Ben, I consider you part of that people that I met in that whole scene. A lot of people know this. I was one of the first people to hear Bethany. I worked at a radio station, unregular radio in downtown Boston, and I remember getting a cut of Bethany, and I knew one of my friends, Dave Melendez, he sent it over to me, like, because I knew you vicariously through the scene. Mm-hmm. But I knew you as like a metal, like not metal shredder, but a shredder.
The Steve Vai guitar.
You were very out there with yourself, which I was completely cool with. And the dance moves, killing.
You like that?
But then I heard Bent Knee, and it was something on a completely different tip. I'm like, it's some Bjork mixed with some Nine Inch Nails stuff, and it was beautiful and dark and heavy. And I'm like, I'm with this.
Thanks.
And it was like, and I see you going around like touring all over the world with it. I'm like, I'm super proud of y'all, man.
Thank you. Well,
I'm crazy proud, because I'm like, I'm seeing good people that grind making it. And I'm like, that's my shit.
Matt is so inspiring to me, and his story really outlines the importance of community and the potential music has to build community. And we wanted to tell you about an organization called Bagley that builds communities for LGBTQ youth in Boston.
Like, say if someone, sadly, kids who are gay, lesbian, gay, transgender, come out to their parents and get potentially kicked out of their house. They have a place for them for education and like job search and just like a general place to just be queer, which is it's a sad state of affairs when you just have to say like, all right, great, there's a place I could just be gay.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had to find space to just be myself, like especially something so basic as like your sexuality and your, just like, I've never needed that, so it's kind of mind-blowing to try to imagine.
You know, some people have a stigma against the term called safe space, where like they think about it as like those kids are like got the participation award. It's just like, oh, everyone, there's safe space to be the snowflake for. It's like, no, you've never had a place where you felt so uncomfortable to just be yourself. It's like, have you ever gone to a bar and like try to hook up, like not even try to hook up, just try to talk to someone you thought was attractive and like see what could happen with that? Yeah, if you're queer and you do that in maybe a place like Boston, or someone like is like hyper, just like ugly masculine, like toxic masculinity, you got a punch thrown at you. You potentially for trying to just talk to someone and make a connection, you get punched or like worse for that. There's all kinds of cases like that, man. And that's why I feel like safe spaces like this for kids coming up, I would have killed for something like that, man. Like, like I said, coming up, I was a black kid living Irish Catholic town that loved death metal, hockey, and didn't have dreadlocks at the time, but had big nappy hair. I'm an alien for everything that I liked.
And then, unlike E.T., there is no place you can go home to. Because, like, this is home. You know what I mean? Like, this is where you should be at home. Here, we should work on that. So the Bagley House is a force that brings that sense of home.
Yes, and support for kids that need it. And I'll very much support them, and I hope you all as well. And whatever Ben does to be able to put this out there for you to donate, please do. And if you there's places like this all throughout the United States, and hopefully all throughout the world. And if you look those places up, if you're coming up, if you feel different in that way, please reach out and try to find your community. It's a scary place out there, man, and I personally lost a few friends along the way who felt like they were too different and got too depressed about it and aren't here anymore. And I wish they were around. So I say it to you, anyone out there, if you're feeling that kind of loneliness, there's a place for you. You can find your people. Whether it's metal, whether it's places like Bagley, whether it's Berkeley, finding friends throughout the world, you can find your tribe. You can find your people.